copies here. I have placed a copy of Birthright. Okay, I think someone removed, but I'll bring another one.
Okay, keep it.
Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up? Perfect. Amazing. So thank you so much for coming out to this event against literature's art breaking free. So this event asks, what role do the arts play in a world of genocide, climate change, rising far-right politics, and increasing inequality? George Abraham, Nida Sajid, and Remi Graves address the use, abuse, purpose, and potential of the arts in causing radical change in our polarized world. And chairing this event today is going to be Fariha Róisín. Fariha is a writer, culture worker, and educator. Born in Ontario, Canada, they were raised in Sydney, Australia, and are based in Los Angeles, California. As a Muslim queer Bangladeshi, they are interested in the margins, liminality, others, and the mercurial nature of being. Their work has pioneered a refreshing and renewed conversation about wellness, contemporary Islam, degrowth and queer identities, and has appeared in Al Jazeera, The Guardian, Vice, Village Voice, and others. Róisín has published a book of poetry entitled How to Cure a Ghost, a journal called Being in Your Body, and a novel named Like a Bird, which was named one of the best books of 2020 by NPR, Globe and Mail, Harper's Bazaar, a must-read by BuzzFeed News, and received a starred review by the Library Journal. Their first work of nonfiction, Who is Wellness For?, an examination of wellness culture and who it leaves behind, was released in 2022, and their second book of poetry, Survival Takes a Wild Imagination, came out fall of 2023. Please, if you'll welcome our speakers for today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We have an incredible lineup. I will be reading bios. I completely forgot that. Today we're going to be talking about against literature. That is what our panel is about. And so we have these three brilliant writers that are going to be discussing what it means to be writing in times like these. So I'm going to start with reading bios, and then they will be reading from their work, and then we will start the conversation. Thank you all for being here. So I'll start with George. George Abraham is a Palestinian American poet, essayist, critic, performance artist. They are the author of When the Arab Apocalypse Comes to America and Birthright, which won the Arab American Book Award and was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. They are the editor-at-large of Mizna and co-editor of Heaven Looks Like Us. You should all buy it. It is available. So is Birthright. Please buy it. Palestinian Poetry, which was longlisted for the Palestine Book Award. They are a graduate of Northwestern's Litowitz, MFA and MA program and teach at Amherst College as a writer in residence. Remi Graves is a poet and drummer from London, a former Barbican young poet. Their work has been featured on BBC Radio 4 at St. Paul's Cathedral and in various anthologies. Their debut pamphlet, With Your Chest, was published by 14 Poems in 2022. Cole won the inaugural Prototype Prize, short form category, in 2024, and it's also available, and it's right there. Nida Sajid is a post-disciplinary educator, organizer, and writer. She holds an MA in Cultural Studies from Birkbeck, University of London, specializing in experimental literature. She is the author of Coop, a novelette, and it's also available, and please buy everyone's books. I'm Fariha. I will be your moderator for today, and I will open it up to all of you to read. Who wants to start? Nida?
Hi, everyone. I can start and hopefully inject some levity into our morning. I'll just set the premise. So my book is called Coop, and it's about a woman named Lena who works in this bougie bookshop in London under a very politically hostile boss. And the scene I'm going to read is Lena and Belle in the shop whilst they're serving customers. I haven't practiced it, so apologies if I mangle it. Officially STI free. Hey, hello, how are you doing? That's the title. Saturday afternoon. I'm tidying the kids section at the back of the shop, reciting snatches of the alphabet under my breath as I unscramble row after row of picture books, periodically tilting my head to make out the Lilliputian letters on the spine. Little People, Big Dreams, Ada Lovelace by Maria Isabel Sanchez Vergara. Little People, Big Dreams, Ella Fitzgerald by Maria Isabel Sanchez Vergara. Little People, Big Dreams, Harriet Tubman by Maria Isabel Sanchez Vergara. Belle is marshalling the till, tucking into a sugar-glazed yum-yum from the rundown Greg's round the corner, neck swiveling between customers and me with dizzying speed. So now this is Belle speaking. So, I went to the clinic the other day, and looks like Mercury is no longer in retrograde, as I'm officially STI-free. Hey, hello, how you doing? Which is such a weight off my shoulders, because I was honestly convinced I had chlamydia. That will be $9.99 altogether. So yeah, hallelujah. Do you need a paper bag for that? Obviously, I should have gone a lot sooner, but it's an absolute trek to get to from Catford, and I swear the receptionist low-key hates me. Thanks, bye. She's one of those ridiculously tanned white women, like not quite Benidorm Nan, but she definitely knows a Benidorm Nan, if you know what I mean. We don't stock Colleen Hoover. You'll need to go to Waterstones for that. Yeah, so what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So the Benidorm Nan adjacent receptionist tells me that there's a 2-hour wait for the walk-in, which is unhinged. Hey, hello, you can't be on your phone in here. I was this close to bailing, but then I started listening to last night's Navarra. No worries, take care. Which was actually a terrible idea, because I truly can't stand What's His Face anymore. But thankfully, the guest they had on called him out. You can leave your trolley bag in the corner. I don't know if you still listen to their shows, but they've really gone off-kilter recently. Yep, there's fine. Anyway, let me know when you want to break for lunch. Apparently, it's a tofu and plantain medley today, which is supposed to be half decent. Yes, dogs are allowed. Although, did you hear the new chef at Zestify is a Caucasian South African? Ugh. No, that's not out in paperback yet. He offered me fizzers the other day. That will be $14.50, which legit felt so weird. We don't take cash, it's card only. Like he's trying to prove he's one of the good white Saffas. See ya. As if that's the thing. But yeah. Oh, cool, you're almost done. I'll just pop out for a quick smoke before you go. Thanks, Lean.
Thank you for that. George, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, y'all. So good to see you. Came over from across the pond. So I'm going to actually read one poem from Birthright first, and then I'll read one poem from Heaven Looks Like Us that may, depending on where the conversation goes, maybe we can read some more, or maybe just talk about more poems from the anthology. But yeah, I'll just get right into it. Ars Poetica, in which every pronoun is a free Palestine. And so it is written, the settlers will steal God's land, and free Palestine will curse the settlers with an inability to season free Palestine's food. A sunburn the shape of the settler dictator's face on everyone who will claim free Palestine's earth, but not free Palestine's skin, soil-stained. There. Free Palestine said it. No one really owns anything Free Palestine didn't unwrite to make it so. Free Palestine's sea, Israeli. Free Palestine's sky, Israeli, but not Free Palestine's thunder. The blame will always be Free Palestine's, and so this will be called an accurate history. The expense of Free Palestine's visibility willed in bloodied cloth or paper. Free Palestine's longest suicide. Free Palestine will die in jail and become Israeli. Free Palestine will die in protest and become kite on fire. Free Palestine will call Hamas fable of every headline. Israeli falafel so dry Free Palestine could start an intifada with it. Headline, Israeli falafel so dry Free Palestine could free Palestine with it. No, Free Palestine will never give Free Palestine itself a name not rooted in upheaval. Free Palestine hyphenated by settler flag. Free Palestine hyphenated by settler pronoun. Will Free Palestine pledge allegiance to English or Arabic? Will Free Palestine exist beyond language? Free Palestine will write poems of olive trees and checkpoints, but no Free Palestine to be found. Free Palestine will name the violence and never the resurrection, like Free Palestine hasn't survived impossible histories to get here. It is written, the blood will be on Free Palestine's hands. Might as well paint Free Palestine's nails while Free Palestine's at it. What? Is this not the ending Free Palestine expected? Did Free Palestine not think Free Palestine would have the last laugh all along? I'm just like, we're in the city of the known turf, J.K. Rowling. So I just had to do a little cheeky for the good people of Edinburgh. This is a poem that is actually the title of one of the chapters. So now we're going to kind of go to Palestine. This is a poem written by Ahlam Bisharet, who is a Palestinian poet in Ramallah, translated from the Arabic by Fadi Judah, and it is a title poem. So all the chapters in Heaven Looks Like Us are idea-based. We didn't want to organize it by last name, God forbid, or into a linear kind of timeline chronology. We wanted to intersperse people in a transnational and multi-generational conversation. And so this is the resistance poetry chapter that is titled after this poem, How I Kill Soldiers. Colonial soldiers, what have they been doing to my poetry all these years, when I could have easily killed them in my poems, as they've killed my family outside poetry? Poetry was my chance to settle the score with the killers, but I let them age outdoors. And I want them to know decay in their lives, their faces to wrinkle, their smiles to thin out, their weapons to hunch over. So if you, dear readers, see a soldier taking a stroll in my poem, trust that I have left him to his fate as I leave a criminal to his many remaining years. They will execute him. and his ears will execute him. As he listens to me reciting my poem to grieving families, he won't be able to slink out of my book or the reading hall as a seated audience stares at him. You will not be consoled, soldier. You will not even as you exit my poetry event with slumped shoulders and pockets full of dead bullets, even if your hand, tremulous as it is from so much murder, fidgeted with the bullets, you will not produce more than a dead sound. Give it up for Ahlan Bisharat.
Thank you, George and Remi.
Yeah, both your readings are awesome and really beautiful and energizing and hilarious as well. My name's Remi. I'm going to be reading from Cole, but this needs a little bit of context just because it's based on some archival research. So I'll talk a tiny bit about that and then I'll read two short pieces. So Cole is written after encountering a trans man in the archive called Paul Downing, who is a black Cherokee from Georgia, who ends up in London in 1905. And like lots of kind of trans history from that time and still this time today as well, we only come up to him in the archive once he's been arrested for transgressing. So he's on Blackfriars Bridge in September 1905, and he's stopping omnibuses, and he gets stopped by the police and arrested and charged under the vagrancy law for being a wandering lunatic. And in that process, he goes to a trial, and then he's outed, and he moves from being in the infirmary, just kind of like a workhouse at that time where homeless people would be sent. He moves from there to an asylum, which I think is a really important shift, that once his transness is understood, even though it clearly wasn't understood, he gets moved and pathologized. And so he ends up in an asylum in Dartford, which is now still, part of it is still NHS kind of building, and it's still a mental health facility. And then the bigger building of the asylum is now luxury flats, which I feel like I need to write a whole book about that, because there are lots of institutions that are medical that are also now luxury flats. The other place that he was in London, Bow Road Infirmary, is also a set of luxury flats. So, yeah, I don't know what it would be like to live in there. Anyway, and so I came across a photo of Paul thanks to Campbell X, who's a filmmaker, and he showed this photo of Paul in 2016, and it really struck me, but I wasn't really understanding my own transness at that time, so I took the photo and then didn't do anything with it. And then more recently, in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, Paul has just been kind of haunting me in a good way, and so that's where this writing has come from. I'll just read 2 pieces. So the first one is called A Fixing, and it's the first piece in the pamphlet, and it just was helpful for me to kind of set out my aspirations, my naive aspirations, engaging with the archive. A fixing. I come here with my mouth to nail the knowing to that tree, this page, to fasten all wondering to a locatable position. I come to the image with a person in mind, will not let them out of my sight until their name gets my throat, their face catches my face all stuck and sticking to. The case book wants remembering and remembering for as many pages as possible to wipe the disappearance clean. I carve repair from neglect to rearrange the past into elegy, presuming elegy possible, the soothing spume after a wave wipes you out. And then the next thing I'll read, I'll maybe read this one. I really didn't want to write in the voice of Paul because I don't know Paul, even though I feel such a connection. But these images started coming to me, and so I just wrote a list of things that I imagined he might have seen. Paul's list. The moon's open face bearing down on the sea at high tide. A fox gnawing its thigh in the middle of the field in Throwley. 2 men swapping tongues behind the alley at Chatham Place. My Loretta doing anything with focus. The things that happened to Daddy. The policeman smiling before bending my arm behind my back. The fine sailor who battened down the mast when the waves threatened to lick us down. The leaf I caught in my hand as it fell from its branch. And I'll leave it there. Cool. Thank you.
I carve repair from neglect. That line, I think that also encompasses so much of what we're going to be talking about in terms of archive. And both you and George have really sort of sat with the archive with these books, and I will get to that. But I guess to start off our conversation, thinking about against literature as a theme, all three of you have had writing careers where you've dictated the terms of engagement, both yours and others, to the work. So I'm curious and interested, how did you do this, and how do you maintain ethical and moral responsibility to yourself and the work?
Great, very simple
Just
question.
very simple. Easy conversation on Saturday.
This is easy to get us rolling, you know.
Who's going to go first?
Big
Who's gonna
question.
take that? I can say something short about that. I think that I had a lot of anxiety. So I started writing this I didn't know I was writing it. I was just doing research on Paul whenever I had time, in between work, and going into the London Metropolitan Archives and just doing small things with the energy that I got from his photo. I needed to do some stuff with it. So I made a little poem, made a little video piece or whatever. And then when I realized that it was a book and I submitted it, then I started having all these kind of ethical worries of like, okay, you know, Toni Morrison says people's lives are their own. You should write fiction. I'm doing the complete opposite of that. Is Toni's ghost gonna, like, you know? So that was a question of like, who am I to be doing this? And I think that part of the thing that alleviated that anxiety is publishing with a small press like Monitor, where we're texting back and forth. The books have been hand-bound. I know that Rory understands what I'm working through. And I also know that it's not going to make loads of money because it's not going to happen. That's not the interest. So I think there's something about wanting this book as an object to be in the world, to bring people back to Paul. I've put the casebook number in the back, so if anybody is moved to, they can go and like visit him, so to speak.
Yeah.
So trying to do small things like that that feel like this is a positive thing, and also that this has all been galvanized by the energy that I felt from him, that I know that that's a true, very personal thing. So that's my only answer to that, really. Yeah.
I think it's, kind of writing that way. I mean, I think Birthright and Heaven Looks Like Us do this kind of very differently. On one hand, it's like I wanted to, the title, there is no poem titled Birthright in this. The title poem is the title. And I want people to see the word birthright, to open it thinking one thing and be like, oh shit, it's a Palestine book. Oh no, I got to put that back. You know, it's a hijack. It's a, you know, and it's the terms of engagement are that kind of spoofy, you know, I want to take a word that, you know, the Zionist project feels so comfortable with, and I want to haunt it and defamiliarize it and poke holes in it. So in terms of engagement, that is the kind of, you know, inviting a bad faith engagement just to spit them back out, you know, to themselves. It's a portrait of a boy holding no picture. You know, it is that nothing of like, this is how I see you. This is how I see that colonial project, as a nothingness that has expanded onto our land and has hijacked our land, and that has vacuated our land of our people. So that's a very personal, petty project, especially given that it's a book about returning to Palestine and actually spending time in Palestine for the first, you know, I'm one of the first people in my family who's actually been able to go back. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the context for this book. But on the other hand, Heaven Looks Like Us, you know, this is a project Noor Hindi and I have been editing for over 5 years. And so, you know, we started this in 2019 and like the idea, kind of dreaming of it. And then we actually physically started and contracted in 2020. And it was kind of our pandemic project in a way. And thinking about just how the world has changed since 2020 to now, and all this rush to edit, you know, like poems for Palestine post October 2023. And some of these collections are incredible, and people are doing like fast work to really just be like, I want to do this as a mutual aid project and stuff. Like I know several, like there's a group of comrades down in Texas who literally rush edited a project to be like, these are all mutual aid donations to Gaza. And I'm like, awesome. But then there's also this weird institutional capture where people are realizing, oh shit, people who've never published Palestinians or Palestinians with care, all of a sudden caring about Palestinians out of wanting to profit and wanting to be relevant and in the conversation. And so Noor and I are we wanted to make a space, of care for Palestinians, Palestinian on Palestinian terms. It was kind of premise number one for us, ethically, right, for this book. Premise number two, all of the, we're donating the royalties. I mean, if this book even, poetry doesn't make money, but if in the case that it does, we were just khalas, no, this is a donation project to Gaza. And so if this makes a single penny, we just can't fathom, taking any money for this project. And then, kind of premise number three, I guess, we wanted to do something that was, again, a contribution, not just the same old 5, Palestinian names you see in every single anthology, the same old, people who are just palpable and legible to the Anglophone world. We wanted to make a space where experimental Palestinian literature could actually have a moment in the spotlight where, Palestinians you've never heard of probably can actually be posed alongside and in the same tradition as Darwish, Al-Qasim, Barghouti, all of these kind of legendary figureheads of our sphere, and not discard of our elders, and not just be oh, move away, bitches, the new folks are here, because that's just not how we move, and that's not our sphere. And also, Michaela Cabney Rain is an elder Palestinian who she has not been published very widely,
Wow.
So how do we actually do that work of connecting with our elders who have been overlooked by these spheres? Olivia Elias, Francophone Palestinian poet, just started publishing at the age of 71. She survived the Nakba and fled at age 4 to Beirut. Now is living in between Paris and Montreal. So actually making the connections with our elders to be look, how can we support you, and how can we actually publish you and not just treat you like an object or like a fetish or something, how can we actually enliven and connect Palestinians across a global context, even through our paradoxes of our diasporic existence. And
Thank you, George.
So when I finished the manuscript for Coop, I somewhat naively pitched it to a few mainstream agencies, all of whom were enamored with the prose but very unsettled by the politics. And there was also some misalignment around how we wanted to frame it. So for me, the book is very much about work and words and how they contort the world, which is now the final tagline. But they wanted to really sensationalize it and describe it as, the brutal realities of living in a brown body, which made me so profoundly uncomfortable because it's fetishistic, but it's also glossing over the material conditions which make life difficult for people of color. And I was also quite conscious of not letting my identity as an author eclipse the artistry of the work. So all of that vanished with Hajar, who are obviously a very politically principled publisher. And I feel really grateful that, my book's not being mutilated by a mainstream press and it's being respected and framed in the way that I want it to be framed. So shout out to my editor, Farhana.
I mean, I think... I think Farhana... Yes, shout outs to the good editors. The editors that do not mutilate work. I think it's quite fascinating that all three of you are talking about sort of this consideration of and slowness of working with smaller publishers and the liberties that they give you and how much they honor the work and understand it's not about capitalism, because all three of you are writing against capitalism in a way. It's in the sense that, the work in all three of these books is, to me, as a reader, revolutionary. And it's exciting, but of course we see these like mainstream large publishers constantly going exactly what you just said, Nida. Like, okay, no, well, we love the prose. It's so, you know, the artistry is amazing, but this is a little too political for me. I loved, there was a character that had like a badge that said Capricorns against capitalism, and I laughed so hard. I am a Capricorn against capitalism. I had a feeling, honestly.
Capricorn moon in the house.
Okay, I see that. We'll talk about astrology later. Very important conversation. But are you a Capricorn too?
Sorry, no. I'm not. Do I have to now disclose what I am?
Yeah, sorry.
Taurus sun, moon, I don't even know. And Gemini, something else.
Okay, yeah. Amazing.
Scorpio sun, Capricorn moon.
Okay. Incredible. Remi, I want to start with you because I was so moved by Cole and the story of Paul Downing. And you write, I'm just going to read something that you wrote because I think it's just beautiful. It's, I think, the introduction. Yeah. Also, can I ask people just, if you are talking, to be quieter because we're having a panel and I can hear people in the background and I would really appreciate it. Thank you. You write, inside I find myself stuck, looping round the flattening violence of the archive and my naive insistence of engaging with it. I now know Paul is nowhere to be found, not in the pages of dusty casebooks or in my own imagination. He's elsewhere, where he has always had to be to survive. These poems and experiments, then, can only ever be a record of my search for parts of myself in the archive. So incredible. What has been the process? You told us a little bit about sort of the ethical implications of, you know, writing about someone who is alive and someone you can't contact, someone who, outside of this work of archiving, ceases to exist in the imagination of most people. How has it been, and what has been the process of searching for Paul?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the book feels like the final last bit in a way. So the research was very personal. I was talking about this yesterday. I was at an event, and I feel like I say in that bit, that really I don't want it to be framed as like getting someone from the archive, because that's kind of a way of like, oh, you're bringing them back. It's like, Paul might be like, dude, leave me alone. I've got stuff to do, right? I think it's more that I was looking for myself, and when I saw him, I thought, oh, wow, I'm resonating. And the other thing to say is that the really great bits have been the workshops that I started doing. So I have a friend, Lucy Capes, who's an amazing, really radical history teacher who let me come into her school and do a project talking about Paul when, you know, trans history isn't on the syllabus, nothing like that. So I was taking in photos of Paul and some of the records with like 16, 17-year-olds and having discussions with them about trans history. And those felt like really wonderful spaces where I wasn't thinking ethically, is this right or wrong? It just felt like, cool, we're having really wonderful conversations about trans history, and we're getting kids to also have a kind of historical understanding of transness. So in that context, which preceded the book, I just felt like I'm sharing my obsession with other people, and other people also seeming to get it. And also giving the kids a chance. I think I had a lot of anxieties about, are they going to be transphobic? What's going to happen? And actually just presenting Paul as a person. There were a few kids who had some stuff to say, but we kind of worked it out as a group, and that felt really important. So that, I forgot what your question was, but that part of like the loneliness that I felt looking for him then was kind of countered by the togetherness of doing the workshops, and also now sharing with other people feels great. Yeah.
I guess the profundity too of and the awareness of that you're not trying to find Paul, you're finding yourself, and the reflection, Paul's reflection helps you understand yourself, which I think is just so beautiful.
Yeah, I think something about the picture of Paul and his gaze is just so like energizing and energized that I just knew he was like, I don't need you to save me. Like, you know, he died in a horrible way, but he's actually fine. And I know, in a way, how do I have the authority to say that? But he's got that authority in that photo. So then I was like, oh, this is just me talking to myself, which is what poems usually are, I guess.
Yeah.
And you hope somebody listens in and vibes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. George, I'm going to go to you next. Tell me about also reaching into the archive and building this substantial and just truly radical anthology with Nur Hindi of Palestinian poetry, especially in times like this, while we are witnessing a large-scale genocide, as your people continue to be slaughtered by Zionist monstrosity.
I mean, it's... I guess, like, just thinking about, on both of y'all's points, you know, sitting with, like, mutilation, for example, and just, like, you know, they do to us in language first what they then do to our bodies, you know, and thinking about archival, I guess, lacuna in one way, and also just, like, the capture, you know, to engage with an archive, like, any of us can become agents of capture, I guess, very easily, you know, and so I think Noor and I were very aware, I guess, of that, of, like, you know, we are very Americanized, very Western Palestinian, and so who the fuck are we to do this? And so from this get-go, we were trying to think about slowness and the way, for us, our first step was to have conversations, actually, kind of very similarly. Before we even did an open call or anything for the anthology, we had 1 million conversations with our community, our elders, our editors in our community, translators, people who've been doing this work so much longer than us, to orient ourselves to, like, what do we actually need as Palestinians right now in 2020, right? And I think that those conversations with, like, Lina Khalaf Tufaha and Naomi Shihab Nai and Hala Alian and Rasha Abdul Hadi, you know, that was the heart that kind of formed our, like, okay, we have a clarity, we have a like political commitment, we have a certain sense of communal duty, right? And that was our position as we went and engaged with, I guess, the quote unquote archive, right? And in it, it's like the word I come back to in a weird way. You know, I was in the British Museum the other day, and
Boo.
I know, boo. Yeah, literally, I was just like, I want to go there and be so derogatory. I'm like, what is the most fires I can start here without getting kicked out and deported back? But and then I just saw all these relics, all these, like, literal mummies, bodies that have been stolen from the people of Egypt and hoarded. And I think back to one of my early conversations with my academic advisor, Rebecca Johnson, who's a scholar of the Nahda, the Arab Renaissance, 1800s literature. And and the metaphor we always return to in that study was, like, the West likes to mummify the Arab body in terms of literary form, in terms of representation, in terms of capture, in terms of archive. That is what the West wants the Arab body to do. And so, whereas on the opposite end of that, an anthology comes from the word for flower. It comes from the word for aliveness, you know. And so how do we return anthologizing? You know, how do we not mummify Palestinian bodies in our curation? How do we actually treat Palestinian body with aliveness, even if, Rafat al-Arir, like Arhamo, sent us his poem, If I Must Die, years before this genocidal siege. And so we learned very quickly that If I Must Die is not a metaphor, actually, when he was assassinated in December 2023. And that poem, then we learned, was written almost a decade before that, And so we were reading that poem in 2021. He wrote it in 2014, And so in a weird way, it's like, I think this process of, like, treating Palestinians with aliveness is how do we write about Palestine without assuming, especially Gaza, without assuming an already dead position? I do not live in a world, quote unquote, after Gaza, according to Pankaj Mishra. I don't think any of us live in that world too. But a lot of the ruling class wants us to live in that world, right? And so how do we write about Palestine in Gaza without assuming deadness in our language, in our treatment, in our material politic. Again, it's as you said, no, this has to be an anti-capitalist anthology if it's going to treat Palestinian bodies with aliveness, because capitalism is the fuel of this death machine against us. Exactly. Is the fuel of the arms and everything, and so that was also a very easy, clear departure point. Like starting point for us as well. I think so I guess returning to aliveness is kind of the short answer. And in that, just, we had to go with the flow of the community, with what people wanted to send us, with, we had to, that's what it meant to produce Palestine on Palestine's terms. And I think the last thing I'll say is, even refusal. One of our only contributors who pulled out post-2023 was the amazing, amazing Ghazawi poet, Mohammed Musa, who's a friend and who's very beloved. And his poem was titled, "Gaza, Hope is an Option." Oof. And he just sent us a very brief one-line email. I no longer have interest in publishing this poem. Oh, God. And I'm just like, and that is just, and then in a way, we realize post-2023 both that this anthology, where already 95% of the curation was already done before October 2023. The intro was the last thing we did, which was January 2024. We then realized the book object was already haunted before it even existed in the world, and we are producing future hauntings in a way with this object. And hauntings are a way of bringing the body back to aliveness in a archive that wants us dead and wants to preserve us mid-death. And I think haunting is actually haunting is a force spectrality is a force that's trying to insist on aliveness, actually. And so leaning into, no, this is a deeply haunted object, actually, because that is how these Palestinian writers who were martyred are keeping us alive. And that is the same grace and same care is how we want to treat living Palestinian writers. We want to publish them and support them while they are still alive, and not after that they've become a headline, or even worse, after they die and do not become headline. They die quietly and silently and beyond the gaze of this fucking Western spectacle, news, everything.
Yeah, thank you for that. In that sense, the haunting, there's a parallel between you and Remi, and what that work is producing, and there's so many things that you brought up, George, that I just want to reiterate. Sort of like the death of Rafat El-Arir is not a metaphor. I must not die. I must die. If I must die, I was like, something's wrong. If I must die is not a metaphor, and also just. Oh God, now I've forgotten what I was going to say. But the corpse of it all, the bodies and the ways in which we engage with Palestinian life, and also the ways in which we engage with Palestinian death, and agents of capture. I loved what you said about that, not becoming agents of capture, and how to honor the work and remember that, the privilege that goes into being a Palestinian American poet, and engaging with people in Gaza, in Palestine, and the responsibility there. Thank you so much for all of that. Nida, it's your turn. The tone changes with you because I found your book so hilarious, and it's valuable and important to talk about the place of joy, and what you said about the Ghazawi poet George, and the place of hope, and what does hope mean in times like this. I think that's going to be something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. And in the introduction, I loved how you also talked about like singing. We continue to sing. And I sort of felt that way reading Coop, because revolutionary work can be infused with joy. It can be infused with humor. In fact, it has to be, because we have to stay alive, and we have to consider the possibilities of our aliveness. And so you write in the chapter, my fiance and I are doing a photo shoot here today, Saturday. Belle lopes into the shop with a keffiyeh tucked into a leather cap and ribbed hoops swaying from their ears gold and wide. Claude and I are making our way through the bi-weekly delivery. Piles of hardbacks and softbacks and gatefolds line the counter like lacunal Jenga towers. We chip away at them with hushed trips to the shelves, careful to step around the tension. Flattened cardboard boxes with turquoise logos lie discarded in a corner. Their colors, once a novelty, now evoke monotony. 3 years at the bookshop have reduced literature to a commodity. It smells like hate in here, Belle whispers into my neck. Tell me about writing these layered and highly observant characters and how politics is factored into your writing.
It's so nice to have someone else read my work, so thank you for that. I think something that allowed me to introduce a lot of layers into the work is the form. So there are 3 overarching registers that tell the story. So there's the main narrative, which sees Lina engage with literature in the very extractive context of the bookshop. And then there are messages and emails from Lina's parents, which serve as a textual testimony of sorts, relaying what their experience is like as immigrants. And then there are excerpts from a creative writing course Lina is doing on the side, which stir broader questions of creative agency and what it means to, undertake the activity of structuring meaning itself. And I think what I wanted to do with those 3 is to demand a more elevated level of engagement from the reader and ensure that there's no way to piece the story together without the reader reckoning with their own situatedness and their necessary partiality. I know a lot of people shy away from experimental fiction because the form can feel quite obscurantist, but I think I personally see the obscurity as an invitation for signification. I think there's so much the reader can bring to the work. But at the same time, I also wanted to maintain the right to opacity. So obviously the book's written in English, and I've been reading a lot of Ngugi wa Thiong'o's work, and he speaks really compellingly about, writing in English as upholding the empire of European sounds. And as someone who is bilingual and also a denizen of the diaspora, I think that's something that I grapple with quite a lot. And something I wanted to do was to disrupt the dominance of English in the book, which I've tried to do by including poems which are in Urdu. And I think that felt really important, to have these semantic slivers which will only be comprehensible to a few people. So I really, really wanted that. And shout out to anyone who speaks Urdu and English. So, yeah.
It's like hundreds of millions of people speak Urdu.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
That's the reality,
Yeah.
And here we are. I loved what you said. We are all writing in English, and English is a colonial language, and we're in Edinburgh, and sort of the impacts of empire, and that's why this conversation feels so necessary. And I'm so grateful for all of the wisdom that the 3 of you have brought. I think that my consideration also as a writer and a reader and someone who is deeply involved in organizing and working towards a liberatory future, I can't help but consider what role liberation plays in all of your lives, because it is sort of very present in the work. And I imagine, even Remi, what you were saying, like your work out of everyone's is probably more personal, but I imagine sort of being in a trans body, being in a black body, like there is this constant consideration of liberation. So maybe I'll start with you if it resonates.
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
What is the role of liberation in your work? Sorry, I'm
in my work or in my life?
If you want to talk about it in your life, does it come into the work?
I think that reading has always been a liberatory practice. I've not thought of it in that way. I've not framed it in that way, but reading, my dad was always giving me Toni Morrison and lots of fantastic writers, and I just was like, oh, wow, okay, these are great writers. They can write about whatever they want. And it just felt like the world of possibility was very open. You can travel into other people's minds. You can travel into other ways of thinking. And then I guess for me, writing, I'm always writing for myself first and trying to kind of present a very brave, emboldened version of myself that I think will exist at some point, that I'm writing towards, in a kind of hopeful feeling of okay, I don't feel as brave as I want to be, but actually writing this is making me more brave. And I guess I don't have very wide aspirations for liberation. I think mine are much more just how I treat myself, how I treat people around me, and that feels like where I can have actual impact. I think it gets a bit, I grew up in a political household, but it gets a bit kind of muddy, and hope is hard to find when you're kind of looking at the way so much is going. So I think just trying to be honest about how I'm feeling with people feels like a liberatory thing of I do a lot of workshops, and I used to always be okay, Remi workshop brain, going to be fun for the kids, that kind of thing. And now I'm actually I'm super tired, but I'm going to turn up in that way, and that feels, I know it's tiny, but that feels very freeing for me to just be actually as I am. And I think that push towards being as I am in all kinds of ways feels like the energy that's keeping me going. Yeah.
We often don't think about how liberation and liberatory work is also granular work. It is self work. It starts with the self and the boundaries of self, and I think as writers maybe there is this constant need to produce and to put something out there, and sometimes I speak for myself, but I don't, obviously it's lovely to have these people here, but I don't have that thing. I think a few people are reading my stuff, and I'm just reading and writing because I want to. I don't have I must keep doing, because I don't think there's an audience, so that doesn't plague me, which I'm glad for. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing it doesn't plague you. George?
It's, I love this too, because again, how so many people with amazing politics then don't know how to treat others around them, and so
yeah.
And do you really have a good politics if you don't treat people right? Seriously, So no, I love that answer. And as an educator too, this is where I'm I'm in academia. I teach at a small liberal arts college, so it's now the plug of I love teaching, and so that is my one of the biggest joys, one of the biggest sources actually of joy in my life is the classroom and the revolutionary potential of the classroom, and how again to resist the capture of the classroom by the politics of the university. And that's one of the things I've been really just, I don't know, it's a generative, and it's an exciting thing for me to design. I taught last spring a Palestinian resistance literature seminar, and it attracted the exact kinds of student organizers, from all across the college system I teach across. And it was great because it's there were 5 campuses represented in that room, and I'm great, they all left being friends with each other. And I'm that's the goal of Palestinian literature actually, is to bring us together and to make our interventions sharper and braver, and it's not what does literature represent? It's more of what does literature give us permission to do? in the world concretely and with each other. And so how are we in the business of producing objects that can then hail people in and that can then provide people potentials for actually forming and doing the work of building networks of kinship that we need and collectivities that we need. And again, I really think that it doesn't happen on this large scale because it needs to happen actually on a smaller scale. It needs to happen hyper locally. Like Linda Sansor said something at the Socialism Conference last year that's really just stuck with me of all politics is local politics. Right. And I'm just like, I could never think of such a succinct, easy and digestible and so true thing to say, because I think one of the things that Palestine has done, not just in literature, but just with us in the world, is make us realize how our local sphere touches this larger genocidal system. And at a very, very material level. And it's not just Palestine, it's Sudan and like all the, you can't say free Palestine and then go live, laugh, Dubai, seriously, literally. I was just like, it's like, the UAE makes my heart fall into my stomach right now. I'm like, no, fuck this, and the tech industry in Congo right now, we can't, we can't unsee this. There are many genocides that are occurring still. The genocide against Black and Indigenous people in the U.S. is still ongoing and is still actively being fought against. In our Habayeb, or the Interlink books in Massachusetts that I work with, they're the only Palestinian-owned book publisher in the U.S., and their land acknowledgement is not a simple, we acknowledge blah, blah, blah. They're like, hi, there are people like literally down the street from us who are actively fighting to give their land back. Here's a link where you can donate part of your monthly paycheck to these indigenous people right here and right now, and it's an action and it's a call. And I'm like, there's no way to ethically be a Palestinian as a settler in that context if you're not going out of your way and doing that work. And so I just think about, I think that for us, it's like, this is where Palestine, the metaphor, is actually a useful construct. It's also a dangerous one of like this. Palestine's a sad case of what happens when a people are reduced to a metaphor, on one hand, but on the other hand, to be pest optimist about it, the optimism in it is, no, Palestine is not just a land, it's an orientation to relationality. It's an orientation to how we relate to each other and to the world, despite and against capital and against imperialism and power structures, period, and that is large, but that is our work, to be like, no, we do the large work small and we do it right and with each other. And we can hold all of this together. If we have to. We actually have to hold all of it. If we're not holding all of it, we're failing.
Yeah. Thank you for that, George. Nida?
You two have put it so beautifully. I don't have much to add. But I'll just say that a lot of the book tries to explore how big P politics translate into small p politics and influence our everyday interactions. So I'm really drawn to the idea of radical granularity, almost. And I remember when I was workshopping the book, it sometimes felt quite strange to think about violent systemic injustice in terms of how it plays out in my fictional narrative. And I remember having to remind myself that, literature isn't just mimetic, it's also mutinous. And it is important to talk about these historical and contemporaneous atrocities because, I do believe that literature can, contribute to truth-telling and world-building on a new premises. So I think there is an urgency that underpins that.
Absolutely. The responsibility of literature, and also, George, what you said, it's what it affords you and how you can infiltrate these spaces with your work and with your language, and really the power that you can gain from telling the truth, to speaking to the truth. I have so many more questions, but we are out of time, sadly. We were out of time like 10 minutes ago. And I was Mohammed, do we have time for audience questions? Maybe two? Two short questions. Does it? Okay. Assigning. Yes. Remi was like, I did not sign up for this. Okay, one question over there.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing all of this and for being here today. This question is for George, so I'm going to keep it short, but you could also delve into it. I would like to know if you can share with us a little bit more about the process of translation with the translators, and if we have time, maybe you can talk about your relationship with English. You have already done some of it, but yeah, with the translation work.
It's really, thank you for that. This anthology returned me to Arabic in such a beautiful way. My Arabic teacher, Fadia Antabli, sent us a poem in Arabic that I helped her translate into English. And so she would audit my poetry classes at Northwestern. I would take her Arabic classes. So we had this non-binary student-teacher relationship in a weird way. And, she's like the Palestinian Teta poet of my heart. And so, yeah, I think about the Fadi Judah, idea of, Palestine will not be liberated in English, and how to return to Palestine in Arabic, even though Palestine in English is doing beautiful things, too, and not discarding the, immensity of, people like Zaina El-Sous, for example, who's doing such comradey kind of work, and I think that work means to dismantle capital E English, in the short of it, and so we didn't approach via translators we trust, reaching out. We did the broad call and we opened it to translation submissions from everyone, but most of the translations in this anthology are by Huda Fakhreddin, Fadi Judah, and Lina Khalif Tafaha, because they are someone politically who we just have an extremely trusting relationship with. And and also Adab and Sawana and Palestinian translators. And so it's we can be the, people who translate our own work on our own terms. We don't need to serve ourselves to white institutional spaces for translation too. We can do that work ourselves and with rigor and with care. So it was a nice reminder of that. Yeah.
I think we might go to another question, but thank you so much for that question.
Oh, I thought you were passing it to someone else. I thought you were saying me. No thanks. Oh, hello. Thank you to everyone for having this talk in the morning. It's heavy stuff, I understand, but I really appreciate it. My big question is to everyone: how the heck do you stay motivated? Because I find everything so overwhelming. It's, a massive emotional toll with everything going on. How do you feel that, you have something to say, it matters, it's not pointless? How?
I just think because reading is I read as a lifeblood. Even if I don't write, I read. So just the notion of maybe I might write this and somebody else might read it, one other person might read it, that's kind of enough for me. And then the rest is just keeping going every day, which we all struggle with. But I think that reading really is important to me. So writing is also important, but just because of that. I guess that's my only answer, really.
Yeah, that's the tricky one. I think I stay motivated by crying convulsively a lot. I find that very cathartic. And I think when I'm writing, I try and write just for maybe 5 people in my life who I'm quite close to, and I'll think about them reading my work when I'm writing, and I think that definitely catalyzes the creativity. But it's difficult. It's difficult.
That's so lovely what you said about thinking about actual people in your life that you're writing towards. I'm going to try that. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
It In a similar way, group chats, like my poet group chat, friends of group chats, they really keep me going, and I love writing poems that I just drop into my group chat, or reading my friends' poems in there, that some of these will never ever, thank God, they will never be published, in the world. But they're so precious because, again, they're only written for this audience of 5-6 people, and so like I love that. And also just reading, I really just resonated with both these answers, actually, because reading is my only sanity, truly. And who we're reading too, like for me, reading, going out of my way to be like, no, I want to read political prisoner work. I want to read work from our intellectuals who've been held hostage and are still being held hostage by these entities, whether it be the U.S. carceral entity or the Zionist carceral entity, and this is how we return to each other, by not, reading is a way of like not disposing of our people, actually, because they really just want us to dispose of each other, like truly, just, and our people, quote unquote, writ large, not just Palestinian and or trans and or queer, insert all of the identities I have or whatever, but just our people writ large, and so I don't know, I think I'm leaving this feeling really inspired, reading as a life-affirming practice, And I can't wait to go back to tell my students, like, I met this amazing poet, Remi Graves, who told me about reading as a life-affirming practice, so y'all better read.
I'll also add that I think that there is so much work to be done, and I remind myself that the work has to be done. We have to liberate ourselves. And that means collapsing white supremacy. That means collapsing these structures that have defined how we exist with one another for centuries. And so, as was mentioned earlier, Palestinian liberation is about also Sudan. It's about Congo. It's about the Americas. It's about the ways in which we have all been hijacked by white supremacy. And so how do we unlearn these structures? I think this is why we are here. I've been thinking a lot about alchemy recently, and I did a talk yesterday about alchemy and the value of alchemy, and Muslims and Arab scholars for 900 years were very invested in the forms of alchemy, so much so it's within the Quran how to do so. And so we are in a darkness, in the shadow world. A lot of writers are telling us, we've entered mythologically this underworld, and that's where we are right now. We are existing within a space-time continuum that we've never been in before. These multiple atrocities happening, and we are not just meant to be witnesses to these atrocities. We are supposed to arm ourselves with intelligence and remind ourselves that the work in the global north is as valuable as the work that's happening in the global south. And we have to help our comrades on the ground, and we have to do the work to revolutionize ourselves. And so please let this conversation remind you that the work starts with you. How do you not lose hope? You don't lose it inside of yourself. You remind yourself of your privilege, of existing in the world that you do, and the access that you have. And what does that mean to then actually work towards liberation? That's why I talked about liberation. That's why I wanted to hear you all talk about liberation. Because to me, these are the questions of our time. And these are the questions of how we survive and how we fight back. Resistance is everything. Resistance is everything. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for our incredible writers. I'm so moved by the work. And there will be a book signing at the back. So please buy these incredible books. You can also buy my book. And there will be, these wonderful authors will sign your books. Okay, thank you.